Okay, hello everyone, it's Lennon. I want to talk about theory and praxis, but not in the way that you think. Okay? This I guess, could be considered Fail Tales 2. After making the Fail Tales tag video, I'll leave that below for you, I started thinking about magical theory, right? And power, and the ways in which they say you could get power, okay? Now, before we look at magical theory, I want to say that I do consider, I'll say that I adhere to the 5 magical models. I've made a video on this too, which I'll leave below as well, okay? And also a video with Angela Symposium interviewing Frater UD, who came up with that, and I'll leave that interview below as well because I think that it's insightful. But anyways, I digress. So you have the 5 models of magic. This is the realms in which you believe in all of them. You believe in the meta model, which is more of a chaos magic paradigm, or you believe in some and not others, right? So that automatically off the rip, you've got to decide which one of the 5 models you believe in. Okay, those on belief. And which magical model that you'll use in terms of your practice. And then you're like, oh, I use a little bit of everything. I use this, and this, and then I don't use this. So you cross it out, right? And the whole magical practice that you build is based on what's resonating, what you're going to keep, and what you're going to cross out and not do ever, because you just don't believe in it. And I got to thinking about this too, that when doing this and building a practice, it's great. But none of the books, and not a lot of people mention this, I don't think, about how do you know when to do what, okay? Now, moving on to magical theory and the 4 aspects, 4 ways, I'll say, even you can say paradigms, in which you gain power, magical power. Correspondence says you, the universe at large, like the macrocosm, okay? Or deity/divinity. Okay, if that is the case, right, then and magical theory posits that your main sources of magical power come from these 4 realms, okay? Again, if that's the case, you have to go through this whole list of things and cross out and decide what you're going to keep, decide what you believe in. And all of it can be based on your magical tradition, and possibly your ancestry, possibly where you live in the world, and then you have to be like, okay, I'm part of this tradition we believe this, right? And then you go through those 4 things plus the 5 at the beginning, the 5 models, and then the 4 sources of magical power. You have to go through that, and it's either based on your beliefs or based on your tradition's beliefs. Sometimes the Venn diagram of that might compel you to cross more things out too, because you're like, okay, well, my tradition believes in this, but I don't really believe in this. So you cross that out. And seems like there's so many charts, okay? And the question I kept coming back to was, how do I know when to do what? And it's not that my practice or that I myself am confused, okay? Let me stop you there. I'm not confused. It's more that I like to come at magic from this philosophical lens, and I like to pose these questions to myself and to you guys in my audience, okay? So it's not so much that I'm confused, it's just that I'd like to have a conversation about it. So if you feel so inclined to talk about the magical models and magical theory, but also how to know when to do what, then feel free to leave a VR, okay? I'll maybe call this hashtag magical theory, okay? Just for clarification. But the question is posed because, say you want to do a working. Say it's a spell. And you're like, okay, the source of this spell's power is going to be its correspondences. You've got buckets and buckets of information in correspondences, because there are there's herbs, and there's colors, and there's numbers, and there's you know, whether you're going to use the elements, earth, air, fire, water, and stuff like that. Then, so correspondences is just like heavy, heavy information, right? Then you have to decide if that magical working is going to have power based on the correspondences, or is that magical working going to be based on the power of your divinity or the power of a deity? Is that magical working going to be generated by your power, the power that is innate to you? Or is it going to be the macrocosmic power? You're using void and chaos energy, you're using planetary energy, timing in terms of that, possibly even planetary in terms of the correspondences therein as well. But I would typically say that planetary and like planetary timing, planetary associations would go more into the universe macrocosm realm. But I don't know, though. It might not. It might be in correspondences for all I know. But it's like, how do you know when to use which source? Okay? You've got jar magic. You've got candle magic. You've got water magic. You've got spells that you work on with your deity. Spells that you work on with just yourself. Practical or enlightenment, theurgy versus thaumaturgy, and it's like, okay, how do you know from one working to the next what to do? My magical practice is so spontaneous, and I said this, like I said in my Fail Tales video, I'm so spontaneous with my practice that I'm more the fly by the seat of my broom. My magic is so spontaneous that I just tend to go and do what I want in it, okay? But I pose again, I don't know if I'm repeating myself, but I pose the question because it's not always, like if someone wanted the rules or someone wanted to have some kind of like something in a book, okay, that's telling you how, all right? They don't really go into this. A lot of the witchcraft books don't really go into the how do you know when to do what? If these, they may even go over magical theory and the sources of power, but then they may not tell you, okay, for, you know, these are the reasons you would want to invoke or evoke deity or divinity. So this is how you want to work with them, right? But if you're doing a spell, just like say it's a practical spell, let's just say I call it a money spell, whatever, it doesn't matter. How do you know, okay, this working is practical, so I need to do some correspondences, but also some planetary and some timing. I'm going to throw some moon water on that. So there's 2 things, okay? 2 of the 4 sources. And then you're like mind, body, spirit, energy. In terms of an energetic model, you're going to blast that with your source of power as well as a you, because you're you and you're doing it. And then it's like, you know what, I've tried this a couple of times and I think I want to get my deity involved. So you're like, okay, I'll put their essence into this working as well. Do you intrinsically use all 4 sources at every working? Or do you pick and choose? Or is there some kind of laid out rule that I don't know about? Because again, my practice isn't going to change whatever y'all's answers is. Like I said, I tend to do, when I do deity or divinity work of any kind, it's less in the practicality. It's more in the enlightenment and ascension and invocation and evocation. Okay, not necessarily to put their essence into a practical working. So that's just my view. But some people might be different. Some people be like, I want a little bit of everything into every working that I do. But how do you know? You're just making it up? That's the question. I think that it's so interesting to think that maybe I'd get 100 different answers for this, which is okay, because I don't think there is any one right answer. But it's so fun to think about the philosophy of magic in this way, because when I was did a working the other day, it was you could even call it a road opener spell, because I was like trying to evoke a change, right? A change needs to come about. And I had a poppet, a clay poppet that I use for certain workings, okay? And I had a snake skin, and I attached the snake skin to the poppet with twine, okay? And then I lit some candles, and then I let those candles burn out, okay? I incanted some words, yada, yada, yada. In terms of correspondence, the only real correspondence was sympathetic. That was the poppet. And then I had a correspondence with the snakeskin as a symbol, a representation of change and transformation. But I bound the whole thing in string. So it looked like a binding, but it wasn't a binding. It was a releasing, technically. And I didn't use road opener oil like I could have. I didn't use my new moon water because I didn't feel like it, but I could have. And then I lit candles, but it wasn't technically fire magic. I wasn't utilizing the candle because of its innate fire properties in terms of a correspondence. It just looked pretty and I wanted to let the candle burn out. So what kind of spell was that? Was that a candle spell? Was that a poppet spell? It was all of it. So that's what I'm saying. I just did what it felt right. Are we doing that? I don't have much of a canon in terms of my magical workings because I tend to do like this very empathetic. I have a very empathetic practice. Like I'm like, okay, you know, this needs to happen. This is my intention. I work on my intention, yada, yada, yada. Okay. And then that's like in the theory stage, right? And then I blast through the veil between theory and praxis, okay? Jump over to praxis and then do whatever I've set out to do in the theory stage, but it may not have a correspondence. It may not have me. I might be way over here, okay? I might be like floating outside my body. It might be a possessionary, you know, type of experience with the spell, and that's like the me energy that I'm putting in there is more of ecstatic. Or I might do a working and I'm like, yeah, I need, you know, this is a devotional working that involves deity. Do I add correspondences to that? Do I add, like, if you have crystals and you have certain things that aren't offerings to a deity, let's just say, those are correspondences. Do you add those into that devotional working? When? How do you know what sources to use when? Again, I like to fly by the seat of my broom. But I don't know. If you have an idea, I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear how you guys go about thinking about this. When you're coming up with, when you're in the theory stage and you're coming up with what you want to do with your intention, okay? Once you have a desire and you build an intention out of that, you're like, okay, now what? You're at this stage. You're sitting in between theory and praxis. The veil, the diaphanous gossamer veil, and you're sitting there getting, you know, blessed with the threshold, the liminal space that is that. Are you sitting there in the planning stage in this liminal space now going, okay, and it's set up like you recipe it out. Okay, these are my correspondences. If I don't have any, I won't write any down. This is my divinity. This is what I'm doing with this. This is, okay, I am going to light candles, but it has nothing to do with fire. That's not a correspondence. I'm going to set this bowl of water and whatever, okay? You plan, have an intention, desire, right? You're building that in the theory. And then once you have that, you go through the scientific method, whatever, any kind of paradigm that you want to use. And then you sit down with yourself and the intention and figure out what source of power do I need to give to it. Do you work in a hierarchical way where practical spells get the correspondences, and then the more power you need in that working, the higher the source needs to be? So if you have a working that you want to do and your intention is pretty intense, then that's when you would go to your deity with it. seems like a pretty good setup, but is everyone that way? Does everyone work in the sources of power way like this? I don't know. What is your magical recipe in terms of magical models, sources of power, the 4 sources of ways that you power your workings, and using your foundational magic? It's a magical recipe. It's a magical math equation. It's so beautiful. I'd love to start a conversation below. I hope everyone's having a magical day. Much love.